The massive ship appeared without warning above Earth's moon. It was bigger than anything humans had ever built, stretching across the sky like a metal mountain. The ship's hull was dark purple, covered in strange symbols that glowed with a cold blue light. Within minutes, every satellite, radio station, and communication device on Earth received the same message. Ambassador General Krell stood on the bridge of his flagship, looking down at the small blue planet below. He had done this 847 times before. The routine never changed. Arrive, announce the terms, wait for the inevitable surrender. His silver armor reflected the lights of the control panels around him. His 4 eyes scanned the primitive world with barely concealed boredom. "Attention! Inhabitants of the 3rd planet!" Krell's voice boomed across all human channels. "I am Ambassador General Krell of the Valorian Empire. You have been selected for integration into our glorious civilization. You will submit all resources, technology, and governing authority to the Empire. You have 1 rotation of your planet to comply. Resistance will result in complete annihilation." In the United Nations headquarters in New York, chaos erupted. World leaders scrambled to connect to emergency channels. Military commanders went to high alert. Scientists tried to understand what they were facing. The Secretary General, a calm woman named Maria Chen, called for order. "We need to respond," she said, her voice steady despite the fear in the room. "But we need to be smart about this." The Emergency Council worked through the night. They reviewed the alien ship's message again and again. They analyzed the technology they could see. They argued about what to say, how to say it, and whether to say anything at all. Some suggested immediate surrender. Others demanded they fight. Chen listened to all of them. "They think we're weak," said General Morrison, his jaw tight. "They think we'll just roll over." "Maybe we should," replied Ambassador Okonkwo. "That ship could destroy us all. We have no defense against that kind of power." Chen raised her hand for silence. "We don't know what we're dealing with. But I know one thing. Humanity has never surrendered without understanding what we're surrendering to. We need more information." They spent hours crafting a response. It needed to be diplomatic but firm. Respectful, but not weak. When the message was finally ready, Chen herself delivered it to the Valorian ship. "Ambassador General Krell," she began, her image transmitted to the alien vessel. "We have received your message. Humanity thanks you for your contact. However, we must respectfully decline your offer of integration. We are a peaceful species, but we value our independence. We wish to establish diplomatic relations with your empire as equals, not as subjects. We hope you will understand and respect our position. But if you cannot, we must give you fair warning. Do not tangle with us." On the Valorian flagship, Krell watched the human transmission with growing disbelief. His officers looked at each other in confusion. In 3,000 years of Valorian expansion, no species had ever simply said no. Some had fought immediately. Others had tried to negotiate for better terms, but none had politely declined and then issued a warning. "Did that primitive just threaten us?" asked Sub-Commander Vex, his translator having difficulty with the concept. Krell replayed the message, studying the human female's face. She showed no fear, no aggression. Just a calm certainty that made him uncomfortable in ways he could not explain. "It seems they do not understand their situation," Krell said finally. "They need a demonstration." Across the galaxy, other species watched the exchange with interest. The Valorian Empire controlled a vast portion of known space. Every species under their rule had learned the same lesson. Resistance was futile. Compliance was survival. The galactic communication networks buzzed with speculation about the foolish humans. On Earth, governments scrambled to prepare. Military forces worldwide went to maximum readiness. Civilians were told to remain calm, though panic buying emptied stores in major cities. Scientists worked frantically to understand the alien technology they'd glimpsed. Engineers reinforced bunkers and shelters. Children asked their parents if the aliens were friendly, like in the movies. Maria Chen did not sleep that night. She stood in her office looking out at the city below. Lights glowed in every window as people stayed awake, afraid of what morning might bring. She wondered if she had made the right choice. Maybe they should have surrendered. Maybe she had just sentenced billions of people to death with her pride. But then she thought about what surrender would mean. Slavery, most likely. The loss of everything humans had built, everything they had learned, everything they were. She thought about her grandmother, who had fought for freedom in another war long ago. She remembered the old woman's words. Some things are worth fighting for, even when you know you might lose. Chen picked up her phone and called General Morrison. How long until our defenses are ready? They'll never be ready enough, Morrison replied honestly. But we'll make them pay for every inch. Good, Chen said, because I think they're going to test us. She was right. As Earth's sun rose over the Asian continent, the Valorian ship began moving. It descended slowly toward the planet, its weapons systems glowing with building energy. Krell had made his decision. These humans needed to learn respect. A small demonstration of power would bring them to their knees like all the others. But Krell had made a critical error. He assumed humans were like every other species he'd conquered. He assumed fear would break them. He assumed wrong. The first shot fired in the war between humanity and the Valorian Empire lit up the morning sky over Tokyo. It was a moment that would change the galaxy forever. The humans had given their warning. Now they would show why that warning should have been heeded. Krell watched from his command chair as 50 Valorian warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel near Earth's moon. The fleet formed a perfect geometric pattern, a display of military precision that had intimidated countless worlds. Each ship bristled with weapons designed to crack planetary defenses. Together, they represented enough firepower to reduce a continent to glass. A simple show of force, Krell told his officers. Destroy their orbital stations. Hit a few military bases. They will beg for mercy within hours. The Valorian ships moved toward Earth with mechanical efficiency. Their targeting systems locked onto human satellites, space stations, and the small military outposts humans had built in orbit. The aliens had studied human technology and found it laughably primitive. Chemical rockets, nuclear weapons, radio communications, like giving stone spears to children and calling it an army. Admiral Sarah Chen commanded Earth's orbital defense from a repurposed space station. She was no relation to the Secretary General, but she shared the woman's determination. When the Valorian fleet appeared, she did not panic. She had been preparing for this moment since the first alien transmission. All units, execute Protocol Chaos, she ordered calmly. On the Valorian flagship, confusion erupted when the human forces did not form defensive lines. Instead, they scattered in seemingly random directions. Some ships accelerated toward the Valorian fleet at maximum speed. Others retreated behind the moon. Still others began erratic maneuvers that made no tactical sense. They flee in disorder, Vex observed with satisfaction. As expected. But something was wrong. The fleeing human ships were not running away. They were moving into positions that made no sense to Valorian military doctrine, but would prove devastatingly effective. The first human ship to die was a converted cargo hauler called the Darwin. Its crew of 12 had volunteered for a one-way mission. As Valorian weapons reduced it to debris, its captain smiled. The Darwin's death was not meaningless. It had gotten close enough. The debris cloud from the Darwin expanded rapidly, but mixed with the metal fragments were thousands of small objects, each no bigger than a baseball. Humans called them kinetic mines. They were dumb weapons, simple as a thrown rock, but traveling at orbital velocities. The Valorian shields, designed to stop energy weapons, offered little protection against solid matter moving at thousands of meters per second. 3 Valorian ships staggered as the debris cloud shredded their hull plating. Alarms blared. Atmosphere vented into space. One ship, its reactor damaged, detonated in a flash of light that lit up the lunar surface. "What just happened?" Krell demanded, rising from his chair. Before anyone could answer, human missiles began arriving from unexpected angles. They came from behind the moon, from inside Earth's atmosphere. From hidden launchers on asteroids humans had quietly mined for months. The missiles themselves were crude by Valorian standards, but there were hundreds of them, and they came from everywhere at once. Valorian point defense systems scrambled to respond. They destroyed most of the missiles, but not all. And that was humanity's strategy. Overwhelm the defenses with numbers. Make the enemy choose what to shoot. Make them make mistakes. A human corvette, little more than an engine with guns attached, dove straight at a Valorian cruiser. The Valorian captain, following standard doctrine, targeted the corvette with his main batteries. The human ship exploded dramatically, and the Valorian captain felt a moment of satisfaction. That moment cost him his ship. While his weapons were aimed at the corvette, 3 other human vessels had flanked his position. They poured fire into his ship's exposed engines. The cruiser went dark, tumbling through space. "They're not fighting like soldiers," Vex said, his voice showing fear for the first time. "They're fighting like predators," Krell finished, watching his perfect formation fall apart. On Earth, in a basement-turned-command center, Colonel Marcus Webb watched the battle unfold on screens fed by surviving satellites. Webb had spent 20 years in special operations. He had fought in a dozen conflicts across 3 continents. He understood something the Valorians did not. Humans had been perfecting the art of killing each other for thousands of years. "Target their command ships," Webb ordered. "Make them react instead of act." The humans had another advantage. Every person in their fleet had grown up playing war games. Video games where you controlled fleets in space battles. Strategy games where you managed resources and troops. Games where you learned to think 3 moves ahead, to predict your enemy, to exploit weaknesses. The Valorians had trained for war. Humans had made war into entertainment, studying it for fun. A young lieutenant named Kim, barely 22 years old, commanded a squadron of fighters. She had logged 10,000 hours in flight simulators, more time than most Valorian pilots spent in actual combat. When 3 Valorian interceptors moved to engage her squadron, she smiled. "Break formation," she ordered. "Execute Maneuver 17. The human fighters scattered, then regrouped, then scattered again. The Valorian pilots, trained to maintain formation and follow doctrine, could not track the chaotic movements. Kim's squadron hit them from 6 different angles simultaneously. The Valorian interceptors never had a chance. The battle raged for 6 hours. By the end, 18 Valorian ships were destroyed or disabled. Another 13 were damaged badly enough to retreat. The human losses were heavier in terms of numbers, but lighter in terms of strategic impact. Every human ship lost had made the enemy pay dearly. Krell ordered his remaining ships to withdraw. His hands shook with rage and disbelief. This was not how conquests worked. The primitives were supposed to be afraid. They were supposed to surrender. As the Valorian fleet limped away, Admiral Sarah Chen broadcast a message on all frequencies, ensuring every ship in the fleet heard it clearly. "You were warned," she said simply. "Do not tangle with us." The message reached not just the retreating Valorians, but every listening species across the galaxy. The impossible had happened. A primitive species had bloodied the Valorian Empire's nose. In homes and councils across 100 worlds, people who had lived under Valorian rule for generations whispered a single question. If humans could do it, why couldn't they? On the Valorian flagship, Krell sat in silence as his ship jumped to faster-than-light speed. His pride was wounded, his reputation damaged. But worse than that, he had planted a seed of doubt throughout the Empire. And doubt, once planted, could grow into something dangerous. He would not make the same mistake twice. Next time, he would not send a demonstration force. Next time, he would bring enough power to crush these humans completely. He did not realize that in making this decision, he was falling into exactly the trap humans had set. They had not won the battle to destroy the Valorian fleet. They had won it to make the Valorians angry enough to commit more forces. And angry enemies make mistakes. The Valorian High Command met in their war chamber on the capital world of Valoria Prime. Holographic displays showed the humiliating defeat at Earth. 500 admirals and generals watched in silence as Krell's fleet was torn apart by primitive ships. When the recording ended, the room erupted in angry voices. "This is unacceptable," growled Fleet Marshal Torvin, his forearms crossed in disgust. "A single backwater planet has embarrassed our entire empire. We must respond with overwhelming force," another admiral agreed. "Show the galaxy what happens to those who defy us." Emperor Draxus, ancient and scarred from 1,000 campaigns, raised one clawed hand for silence. "Assemble battle fleet victorious, 500 ships, enough firepower to crack their planet if necessary. This time, we take no chances." When news of the coming fleet reached Earth, fear spread like wildfire. 500 warships, 10 times what they had barely survived before. Military analysts ran the numbers and found no scenario where humanity won. The best they could hope for was to make the invasion so costly that the Valorians would negotiate. Secretary General Maria Chen addressed the world in a broadcast that would be remembered forever. She stood at a podium, her face calm despite the storm coming. "We face an enemy that wants to make us slaves," she said. "They bring overwhelming force because we embarrass them. Good. Let them come with anger instead of caution. Angry enemies make mistakes. We will not surrender. We will not bow. We will show them what happens when you wake a sleeping tiger." Across Earth, people prepared, not with panic, but with grim determination. Factories that made cars began making missiles. Chemical plants produced rocket fuel around the clock. Civilians volunteered for defense forces. Children as young as 10 helped build fortifications. Humanity had been divided for so long, but now they faced extinction together. The Valorian fleet arrived like a storm of metal and fire. 500 ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the solar system. They formed a wall of steel that stretched across space. Krell, given command of the fleet as a chance to restore his honor, smiled at the sight. "No tricks will save them now," he told his officers. "We advance as one wall. We crush everything in our path." But the humans had spent every moment preparing. The entire solar system had become their fortress. Asteroids had been moved into strategic positions, hollowed out and filled with weapons. Mining stations became missile platforms. Every planet and moon bristled with defenses. Even civilian ships had been armed with whatever weapons could be attached. General Morrison coordinated the defense from a bunker deep under the Rocky Mountains. His command staff worked at stations around him, connected to every military unit in the solar system. He had no illusions about winning a straight fight, so he would not fight fair. "Let them come to us," he ordered. "Make them fight for every inch of space." The Valorian fleet pushed forward, weapons ready. They expected desperate resistance. What they found was something far worse. The humans did not try to meet them in battle. Instead, they harassed, ambushed, and retreated. Human ships would appear, fire missiles, and disappear behind planets or asteroids. Mines would detonate without warning. Communication jamming disrupted Valorian coordination. Krell grew frustrated as his massive fleet crawled through the solar system, bleeding ships to hit and run attacks. This was not glorious combat. This was being nibbled to death by insects. "They are cowards," Vex spat. "They will not face us in honest battle." "There is no such thing as honest battle," replied a human voice over the communication channel. Colonel Webb had hacked into their frequency. "There is only winning and losing. We intend to win." The fighting intensified as the Valorian fleet reached Mars. The red planet had been transformed into a fortress. Human forces had dug in deep, using the planet's canyons and caves as cover. When the Valorians moved to bombard the surface, human ships hidden on Mars' moons struck their flanks. In the chaos of battle, a young human pilot named Jackson performed what would become known as the sacrifice of Olympus Mons. His fighter, crippled and leaking air, dove straight into a Valorian battleship's bridge. The resulting explosion killed the ship's entire command staff. Jackson's last words, recorded by his fighter's black box, were simple: "For Earth." His sacrifice was not unique. Across the solar system, humans made similar choices. Crews of dying ships would overload their reactors and ram enemy vessels. Pilots would make suicide runs to take out key targets. The Valorians, who valued survival and followed rules of combat, could not comprehend this willingness to die. "They are insane," one Valorian captain reported. "They fight like the possessed. They turn their defeats into weapons." As the fleet pushed toward Earth, the battles grew more brutal. The Valorians had superior technology, but humans had something else. They had thousands of years of experience fighting each other. They understood combined arms tactics. They knew how to use terrain. They had read every book on warfare ever written, studied every battle in history, and now they used all that knowledge. A human commander named Okafor, defending a space station near Jupiter, used a tactic from ancient naval warfare. He hid ships behind the station's mass, then lured Valorian vessels into a crossfire. The Valorians lost 12 ships before they realized the trap. Okafor's station was destroyed in retaliation, but the delay gave Earth more time to prepare. Lieutenant Kim, now leading an entire wing of fighters, employed strategies from games she had played as a teenager. She used asteroid fields like terrain in a first-person shooter. She set ambushes like she was playing a strategy game. Her pilots, mostly young people who had grown up gaming, adapted faster than the veteran Valorians could react. The turning point came at Earth itself. The Valorian fleet, now numbering about 380 ships after weeks of grinding combat, moved into orbit. Krell prepared to issue an ultimatum, but Maria Chen issued hers first. "You wanted Earth," she broadcast from the planet's surface. "Come and take it." Every weapon on Earth fired at once. Missiles launched from silos that had been built in secret. Lasers from ground stations burned through the atmosphere. Rail guns, thought too primitive to matter, hurled projectiles at orbital velocities. The planet itself became a weapon. But humans had one more surprise. As the Valorian fleet tried to target the ground installations, thousands of small objects began rising from Earth's surface. They looked like meteors in reverse. Some were actual satellites, others were decoys, but mixed among them were warheads, each powerful enough to cripple a ship if it got close enough. The Valorian point defense systems could not track them all. Explosions blossomed throughout their fleet. Ships collided, trying to avoid the rising storm of metal and fire. The perfect formation collapsed into chaos. Krell watched in horror as his fleet fell apart. They had the superior technology. They had more ships, but they were fighting a species that had weaponized everything, including their own planet. A species that saw defeat not as an end, but as just another tactical option. "Retreat!" he finally ordered, his voice broken. "All ships, retreat to rally point." The Valorian fleet, reduced to barely 200 functioning vessels, jumped away. They left behind the wreckage of over 300 ships. The humans had lost more in raw numbers, but the psychological victory was total. As the last Valorian ship vanished, cheers erupted across Earth. People danced in streets, soldiers hugged each other and cried. They had done the impossible. They had broken the Valorian Empire's main battle fleet. But in the bunker, General Morrison did not celebrate. He knew this was not over. The Valorians would not accept such a defeat. They would come again, with even more force. The next battle would decide everything, and he was right. Emperor Draxus stood before the assembled might of the Valorian Empire. Behind him, holographic displays showed 2,000 warships assembled in formation. It was the largest fleet ever gathered in Valorian history. The Extinction Fleet, called such because nothing survived its attention. "The humans have proven they will not submit easily," Draxus said, his ancient voice carrying across the war chamber. "So we will not offer them the choice. We will surround their system and cut them off from the galaxy. We will wait until their resources run out. Then we will sterilize every world they inhabit. Let this be a lesson to any species that thinks to defy us." The fleet arrived at the edge of the Sol system, like a closing fist. 2,000 ships positioned themselves at every jump point, blocking any escape. They did not advance. They simply waited, weapons pointed inward. The siege had begun. On Earth, the reality of their situation settled over humanity like a cold blanket. The celebrations of victory faded as people realized they were trapped. No ships could leave, no supplies could arrive. They were alone, surrounded by an enemy that could afford to wait forever. Food rationing began immediately. Power grids went to emergency protocols. Governments worked overtime to keep panic from spreading. But beneath the fear, something else stirred. Humans did not do well with idle hands. Dr. Sarah Reeves worked in a laboratory beneath Geneva, Switzerland. Before the war, she had been studying theoretical physics. Now she studied fragments of destroyed Valorian ships. Specifically, she studied their faster-than-light drives. "It shouldn't work," she muttered, examining the alien technology for the 100th time. "The mathematics don't make sense according to our understanding." "Maybe our understanding is wrong," suggested her assistant, a young man named Chen Li. "We've been trying to figure out FTL for decades. They've had it for millennia. What if we're just looking at it wrong?" That simple observation changed everything. Human scientists had been trying to understand Valorian technology through human physics. But what if they stopped trying to understand it and just tried to copy it? Children learn to ride bicycles without understanding the physics of balance. Maybe humanity could learn to travel faster than light the same way. The work consumed thousands of scientists across the planet. They shared data instantly through the internet, collaborating in real time. Teenagers on forums dedicated to science fiction offered ideas that PhDs would test. Retired engineers came out of retirement. Even high school students contributed calculations. Outside Earth, in the cold dark of space, humanity's military forces adapted to the siege. They could not break through the Valorian blockade, but they could make the blockade expensive. Human ships would dart out from behind planets, strike at Valorian positions, and retreat before reinforcements arrived. It was death by 1,000 cuts. Commander Jackson's sister Sarah led one such raid. She took a squadron of fighters on a suicide run against a Valorian supply depot near Neptune. They destroyed the depot and escaped with only 2 losses. As she returned to base, she transmitted her brother's last words. For Earth. It became a battle cry across the human forces. But the siege was taking its toll. Food supplies dwindled. Fuel reserves dropped. Hospitals filled with wounded soldiers who would never see another battlefield. In the bunker, General Morrison watched the numbers and knew they had maybe 6 months before Earth could no longer sustain its population. "We need a miracle," he said quietly. Dr. Reeves provided one. On the 4th month of the siege, her team achieved the impossible. A human ship equipped with a crude copy of Valorian FTL technology successfully jumped from Earth to Mars. The journey, which should have taken months, took seconds. The ship's pilot, trembling with adrenaline, radioed back 3 words that changed everything. It worked! It worked! Production went into overdrive. Every shipyard, every factory, every garage that could hold tools began retrofitting human ships with the new drives. They were crude. They were unstable. They were dangerous. But they worked well enough. Maria Chen addressed the Valorian fleet on the 6th month of the siege. Krell, still commanding the blockade, expected a message of surrender. Instead, he heard something that filled him with dread. "Thank you for the time," Chen said calmly. "We needed it to learn. Now class is over." 200 human ships, equipped with FTL drives, appeared behind the Valorian blockade. Not in front of it where they expected an escape attempt. Behind it, between the Valorians and their home systems. "Impossible," Krell whispered. "They don't have the technology." "They do now," Vex replied, staring at his sensors in disbelief. The human ships did not try to fight the main fleet. That would be suicide. Instead, they did something the Valorians never expected. They attacked the supply lines, Valorian convoys, carrying fuel and ammunition to the blockading fleet, suddenly found themselves under attack by human raiders. Bases in nearby systems woke to human ships dropping kinetic bombardments on their installations. But humans did more than just attack. They talked. Every Valorian subject species received broadcasts showing human victories, showing the mighty empire bleeding, showing that resistance was possible. "People of the Krell Collective," one broadcast began, showing footage of human ships destroying Valorian vessels. "You were conquered 70 years ago. You were told resistance was futile. But we are humans. We were told the same thing. Look at us now. The Valorians bleed. They can die. They can lose. If we can fight them, so can you." Similar messages went to dozens of species. The Valorians had ruled through fear and the belief that they were invincible. Humans were destroying that belief system by system. On a mining colony called Vex 7, a subject species called the Trellix listened to human broadcasts. They had been slaves for 3 generations. Their overseer, a Valorian officer, assured them the humans would soon be crushed. But that night, the Trellix workers noticed something. Their overseer was afraid. For the first time in their lives, they saw fear in a Valorian's eyes. The worker leader, an old Trellix named Chin, made a decision. He gathered the workers and showed them the broadcasts. "The humans fight with ships made from scraps," he said. "We have mining equipment that could be weapons. We have numbers. What do we have to lose?" The uprising on Vex 7 started small, workers refusing to work. Sabotage of mining equipment. But when the Valorian garrison moved to crush the rebellion, they found that news of human resistance had inspired more than just the Trellix. Uprisings erupted on 4 more worlds within a week. Emperor Draxus received reports of the chaos with growing alarm. The humans had not just broken the siege, they had weaponized hope and launched it across his empire. Subject species were questioning their rule. Garrison forces were stretched thin, and the Extinction Fleet, his ultimate weapon, was now trapped at Sol, unable to withdraw without looking weak, unable to advance without taking catastrophic losses. "Recall the fleet," one of his advisors suggested. "Put down the rebellions. We can deal with the humans later. If we withdraw now, every species in the Empire will see it as defeat," another argued. "We will have rebellions on every world." Draxus faced an impossible choice. Keep the fleet at Sol and watch his empire crumble from within, or withdraw the fleet and admit defeat to a primitive species. Either way, the Valorian Empire would never be the same. On Earth, Maria Chen watched the reports of spreading rebellions with grim satisfaction. They had not won yet, but they had shown the galaxy something important. The mighty could fall. The impossible could be achieved. Hope, it turned out, was the most powerful weapon of all. The siege continued, but now both sides knew the truth. This was no longer about conquering Earth. It was about the future of the galaxy itself. And humanity had just shown that future could be different than everyone thought. Commander Sarah Jackson led her strike team through the chaos of hyperspace. Her ship rattling as the crude human FTL drive strained against physics it barely understood. Behind her, 50 other human vessels followed, each one crewed by volunteers who knew they might not come back. Their target was not a military installation. It was something far more valuable. They were heading to Valoria Prime itself, the heart of the empire that had thought to make humanity kneel. "This is insane," her co-pilot whispered, watching the navigation display count down to emergence. "We're going to appear right in their home system." "That's the point," Sarah replied calmly. "They came to our home. Time we returned the visit." The human fleet dropped out of FTL on the outer edge of the Valorian home system. Alarms immediately blared on every orbital platform and defense station, an enemy fleet appearing at the Empire's heart. It should have been impossible. The system was protected by sensor nets and defense fleets. No enemy had reached Valoria Prime in over 1,000 years. The human ships did not attack the planet. They could not. The defenses were too strong, and they had not come to fight. They had come to deliver a message. Sarah broadcast on every frequency, civilian and military. Her face appeared on screens across the Valorian homeworld, in the homes of the ruling class, in the halls of government, even on public displays in the capital city. "People of the Valorian Empire," she began. "My name is Commander Sarah Jackson. My brother died fighting your forces, sacrificing himself so that humanity could remain free. I do not hate you for his death. He made his choice. But I am here to deliver a message your leaders need to hear." Footage began playing. Human victories, Valorian ships destroyed, but also something else. Images of Valorian casualties treated in human hospitals. Captured Valorian soldiers, fed and sheltered according to human customs. Humans did not see the Valorians as monsters. They saw them as enemy soldiers who had followed orders. "We asked you not to tangle with us," Sarah continued. "You did not listen. You came with overwhelming force. You tried to make us slaves. You failed. Not because we are stronger, but because we refused to surrender. Every species you have conquered could have done the same. But you convinced them it was impossible." More footage played. Uprisings on colony worlds, subject species fighting their Valorian overseers, the empire cracking from within. "We did not start this war, but we will end it one way or another. You have a choice now. Make peace with us as equals, or watch your empire collapse around you. We do not want to destroy you. We just want to be left alone. But if you force us to keep fighting, we will, and we will take your empire down with us." The broadcast ended, but the human ships remained at the edge of the system. They did not retreat. They simply waited, weapons ready, making it clear they could strike at the heart of the empire whenever they chose. In the Imperial Palace, Emperor Draxus watched the broadcast with his council. The ancient emperor had seen countless enemies defeated. He had crushed rebellions and conquered worlds, but he recognized what he saw in the human commander's eyes: determination without hatred, strength without cruelty. These humans would not stop. They could not be intimidated. They could not be broken. "If we continue," his chief advisor said quietly, "the empire will tear itself apart. 30 systems have reported unrest. Subject species are watching to see what we do next." "If we make peace," another argued, "we show weakness. Others will demand the same terms." "And if we continue fighting," a third voice added, "we lose soldiers fighting rebellions while the humans bleed our supply lines. We cannot win this war, not anymore." Draxus was silent for a long moment. He had built his reign on the principle of Valorian superiority. the idea that they were destined to rule the galaxy. But destiny, he realized, was not carved in stone. It could be changed by species brave enough or crazy enough to try. "Open a channel to the human commander," he said finally. Sarah's face appeared on the holographic display. She looked tired, but her eyes were sharp. "Emperor Draxus," she acknowledged. "Commander Jackson," the Emperor replied. "Your species has proven to be more troublesome than anticipated. What are your terms for peace?" The negotiations took 3 days. Maria Chen joined the talks, along with representatives from every nation on Earth. The Valorians tried to maintain some dignity, some sense that they were not truly defeated. The humans let them have that. What mattered were the practical terms: mutual non-aggression, recognition of human sovereignty over the Sol system, freedom for any Valorian subject species that wished to declare independence, reparations for the destruction caused. And one more thing that Maria Chen insisted on. "You will send a message to every species in your empire," she said firmly. "You will tell them the truth, that you tried to conquer us and failed, that you made peace not because you chose to, but because you had to. Every species needs to know that resistance is possible." That term hurt the Valorians more than any other. But they agreed. The alternative was watching their empire crumble completely. The treaty was signed in neutral space, aboard a hastily constructed station. Representatives from dozens of species attended, watching as humanity forced the mighty Valorian Empire to negotiate as equals. It was a moment that would be remembered for generations. Krell attended the ceremony, no longer an ambassador general but a regular officer, demoted for his failures. He watched Sarah Jackson sign the treaty and felt a strange emotion: respect. These humans had done what he thought impossible. They had made the Empire blink. As the ceremony ended, Krell approached Sarah. She tensed, hand moving instinctively toward her weapon. "I wanted to say," Krell began awkwardly, "that your species fights with great skill. I have studied warfare for 300 years. I have never seen tactics like yours." Sarah studied him for a moment. "We learned from fighting each other for thousands of years. Every trick, every strategy, every desperate move. We brought all of that experience to fighting you." "You warned us," Krell said quietly. "We should have listened." "Yes," Sarah agreed. "You should have." The treaty had immediate effects across the galaxy. Within months, 15 species declared independence from the Valorian Empire. Most negotiations were peaceful. The Valorians, weakened and humbled, could not afford to fight multiple wars. Their empire, which had stood for 3,000 years, began a slow transformation into something more like a federation of allies rather than conquered subjects. Humanity did not become conquerors. They had no interest in ruling others. But they became something perhaps more important. They became a symbol, proof that the impossible could be achieved, that the weak could become strong, that warning labels should be taken seriously. On Earth, parades celebrated the end of the war. Soldiers returned home to families who had thought them dead. Cities began rebuilding. Life slowly returned to normal, or as normal as it could be after humanity learned they were not alone in the universe. Maria Chen stood on the balcony of the UN building, looking out at New York City. The lights glowed bright again, no longer dimmed for war. She thought about all the people who had died to achieve this peace, the sacrifice of those who had given everything so that humanity could remain free. General Morrison joined her, 2 glasses of wine in hand. He offered her one. "Do you think they'll come back?" he asked. "Maybe," Chen replied. "But if they do, we'll be ready. And more importantly, so will every other species who saw what we did. The galaxy is going to be a different place now. Because we refused to be slaves. Because we warned them and they didn't listen." Chen raised her glass. "To all those who fought, to all those who fell, to humanity." Morrison touched his glass to hers. To humanity. Across the galaxy, in homes and ships and stations, other species watched recordings of the human war. They studied the tactics. They analyzed the strategies. But most importantly, they learned the lesson humanity had taught. That freedom was worth fighting for, that the strong could be defeated, that warnings should not be ignored. The Valorian Empire would recover in time. They would adapt and change, but they would never forget the species from Sol 3 who had done the impossible, who had been warned not to resist and resisted anyway, who had been told they would be destroyed and refused to die. Humanity had earned its place in the galaxy not through conquest, but through sheer stubborn refusal to surrender. They had given the galaxy a gift more precious than technology or resources. They had given it hope, and in a universe that often seemed dark and cruel, hope was the greatest weapon of all. The Valorians had learned that lesson the hard way. Others would learn it simply by watching humanity's example. The warning had been delivered. The galaxy had heard it, and nothing would ever be quite the same again.